Hello, and welcome to this session of Xperts on Tap. I'm your presenter, Rufus Handsome, and I'm a technology advocate with InSource Solutions. Now, in this segment, we're going to be talking about AVEVA Edge HMI, specifically the remote project management capabilities and the IoTView capabilities of AVEVA Edge featuring the Raspberry Pi. When utilizing AVEVA Edge, there are two main visualization methods: the secure viewer and the mobile access. Now, the secure viewer, whether it's a local machine or remote machine, is based on running a console-based viewer. Now, secure viewer can run locally, like on a regular system in a standalone capacity. Think of that as a traditional HMI, where you have the software, all of the software is loaded on a particular system, and the project is loaded on that same system, and it is local or in a standalone mode. Now, Secure Viewer can also run on a remote computer in a thin client mode, where only a subset of the software is actually running on the remote computer. The remote computer then talks back to a data server on the network to get the information. Now, with Secure Viewer running in local mode, all of the project files, everything is running on that local computer. Again, it is standalone. With mobile access, the difference being it is the same application running in a web-based capacity, meaning it's running in a browser, an HTML5 browser. The actual data is coming from a server on the network. Now, with remote management in this segment, we're going to talk about, or I'm going to show you how to connect to a remote host. I'm going to show you how to install the runtime files. We're going to download the project, and then we're going to finally run the project. And we're going to use the local secure viewer on the remote node. And then finally, we'll move on to the IoTView software or the utility that will allow you to run the project, okay, on a remote node such as a Raspberry Pi or a Linux-based system. But in this case, we're going to be using mobile access to view the project, or the runtime environment. So in this case, I'm going to show you how to install the software, install the runtime files, and also download the project, and then finally run the project with using IoTView and using the mobile access capabilities of the software. So with that, let's move on. Now, in this demonstration, I'll be utilizing 3 virtual machines. One virtual machine is my development environment. I have another virtual machine that will be my secure viewer environment, which will be my standalone system. And I have a virtual machine that will be emulating or virtualizing a Raspberry Pi system. And I call that my IoTView. Now, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take a look at our development environment. And in our development environment, we're just going to focus on the remote management aspects of the development environment. So I'm just going to come here and I'm going to select Connect. And this brings up the remote management utility interface. Now, before I begin the process, let's go to our remote node and make sure that everything is in order so that it can receive the installation files and the project files. So I'll go, let's see, full screen. Now, on the remote node, as I said before, all of the software is installed. But this is the key software that needs to be installed or needs to be running. It's called the remote agent. And as you can see here, it's running, but it's not connected. Okay, to it's not connected as a remote client. And this is the information that I need. It displays the IP address, and it's listening for a connection. So now let's head back to my development node. I'll go full screen. And I verify that the IP address is correct. And if everything is good to go, if I click on connect, and it should tell me that I successfully connected, and this is the platform that I'm connected to. Now, you shouldn't have to install the runtime files because all of the software is down there. All I just need to do is download the project. But just in case there are some newer files that are available because of an upgrade or something like that, let's click this button here and install the runtime files. So only the newer files were downloaded. Now, the next thing I just need to do is go to the project tab here, the project tab, and verify that this is the correct project that I want to download to the remote node, and this is the directory I want the project to be installed in on the target system. Once I've verified that, then I just simply click on the download button here. Now, if there's already a project down there, then I can save time by just simply enabling the only newer files checkbox. So I'll just go ahead and click download. I'll get this informational message just asking me, do I want to proceed? And I say yes. And do I want to create the new folder in this location? I just say yes again. And that begins the process. Again, now depending on how large your project is, it can take a little while or it can take a long while. And it also depends on your network speed and your resources on both the source and the target system. Source being the development node, the target system being the node that's on the plant floor. Now, as you can see, all files were sent successfully. So the next thing that we just need to do is just say run, and it says the project has been started. And I'll just say okay here for now. Now, I'm going to show you what I expect to see when I open up my remote node. Now, when you're doing your development, before pushing your project down to the remote node or the target system, I think it goes without saying that you should at least verify that your project works. You're communicating to whatever control devices you expect to communicate with, and everything is operating as expected. Once you've made your verifications that this is what I expect to see or what you expect to see, you can go ahead and exit out. Okay, you push your project down as we just did. And now I'm going to go to that remote node and see if that project is running like I expect it to. And as you can see, I now have the project is running, and I see the same screens that I expect with the same capabilities. This verifies that I successfully downloaded the project, and I can run, and I not only that, but I'm communicating to my control system. Okay, and for that I'll just go ahead and exit out now, and I'll head back to my development node. One other way that you can verify that the project is running without actually, logging on to the development node, is just simply go back to the remote management section of the ribbon here, and simply go to the connect to the target system. In this case, I'm already connected to it. Go to project, and you can see that for the status, the project is running. And here I can start and stop it, and maybe send new files, download new project information down to the target systems and so forth. So this is how I can manage it from this location. Now, moving on to the next part of this segment, we're going to talk about pushing projects down to a Linux-based target system, in this case a Raspberry Pi. Now, this is my virtual machine that I have that represents my Raspberry Pi, and you can see that this is the interface depending on the version of the operating system, which in this case Raspbian, that you have downloaded. This may change again depending on what version of the OS that you're running on your Raspberry Pi. But the look and feel is generally the same. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to open up this terminal here, and I want to check the IP address. So to check the IP address on a Raspberry Pi based system or any Linux system, you'll type in the command ifconfig and hit enter. And I can see that my IP address is 192.168.5.156. Now that I've verified my IP address, there's certain other things that I need to do to begin the process of downloading the material, the files, down to my Raspberry Pi system. Now, in order to be successful in this, I would recommend that you take a look at the help file, the online help, and to get a better sense of what is required to do this. Now, this is not difficult. So you would just simply go to online help here, go to IoTView, go to Runtime, and take a look at the installation little book here, and take a look and find your particular device. Now, a traditional Raspberry Pi runs a certain type of CPU. In this case, because I'm running it as a virtual machine, it's an x86 based CPU, so I'm going to use the Ubuntu example. Now, you can read this at your leisure, and it will tell you step by step what you need to do. But generally, I'm going to give you a step by step, approach to doing this. That's really simple. So what I need to do is I need to look in this directory. Okay, I need to look in this directory, and if I go to my directories here, if I go to program files x86, and if I find AVEVA Edge 2020 in this case, and let's verify that I'm going to the right folder. AVEVA Edge 20, and then go to redist. IoTView, and it doesn't say Linux in this. Oh, well, it does say Linux. I'm sorry. There it is. And this is the folder that I need to get down to my remote node. In this case, my Linux or my Raspberry Pi node. You can utilize a program called PuTTY or FileZilla to get that information down there. And so what you need to do is you get to the other node, and let's take a look at the other node. And I'm going to take a look at my directory here by issuing the ls command for list contents. And you see that I have a folder called IoTView. I created that folder, and I copied the contents of the other folder, okay, from my development node into this directory. So I will just simply cd into that, or change directory into it, IoTView. And if I do another list, you can see that I have these files located in my directory. And this is another subdirectory within that directory. And that's where I need to go. So I'll just simply cd into that one and do a list contents. Now I notice that I have that remote agent application, that utility that I need to run. But if you look at it, it's not highlighted, so that means it's not an executable file. So I need to change that by simply issuing a change mode or change mod command 777 and type in the name of that particular application file. By doing this, this will allow it to become an executable file. So if I say ls for list contents, you'll see that now it's changed color. In this case, it's bright green. And this is just another way, this is one of the ways in Linux that you can change the the attributes of a file to make it executable. So essentially all we did was we just simply changed the attribute so it'll allow it to be run, the permissions. So now I'm going to run this file by typing in the and a / in the word in the name of the file. The ./ simply means look in this directory for this particular file in order to run. And so if I hit enter, I see that the remote agent has started. All right, and type Control-C to close it. Now, once it's started, it's listening for connections. So now all I have to do is go back to the development node. And I'm going to go back to the development environment, and I'm going back to the remote management option here. I'll click on connect. I will disconnect from the other system, and I'll connect to my Raspberry Pi node. The agent is listening for connection, so it should connect successfully. And as you can see, I've connected to the remote device, and it is a Linux-based platform, AMD 64, meaning it's x86. Now, what I need to do from this point is to install the runtime files to that remote node. So as you can see here, it's begun the copying process. Now, this could take a little while or it can take a long while, just like I said before. It depends on your network speed and the resources of both your development node and your target node. In this case, it's a Raspberry Pi. So I will go back to that development node just to, or the IoTView node, to kind of give you an idea of what to expect. And as you can see here, it's sending a lot of files, or in this case, it's receiving a lot of files through the agent. I'll go back to the development node. And as you can see, the process is still going on. Now let's take a look at the help file just to kind of give you an idea of what to expect, or an idea of the process itself. So what I've done is I've gone to this folder, this path that is on my development node, and on my target node I've created a folder called IoTView. And I've taken the contents from this particular directory. I've taken the contents and I've copied it, okay, using a utility called, Putty or FileZilla, or any utility that will allow you to copy files from a Windows-based system to a Linux-based system. And I used a command to change the mode, or to change the attributes of this particular utility right here, this application file, and it's called Remote Agent. Now this is the way it's listed in the help file. It's called change mode, and change this attribute, and just add the execution permission to this file. I just did it another way. And once you've done that, then you simply run the remote agent. And once you run the remote agent, you go to the remote management utility, type in the IP address of the target system, connect to the target system, and then install the runtime files. And that brings us down here. Once the runtime files have been installed, then we will go back to the target system and press Control-C to stop the runtime agent, and then we're going to run a specific file using this command. Sudo simply means superuser do. Okay, it's just it's a command that gives you administrative access to install software. And again, this dot with the / simply says, look in this current directory for this particular file and run this particular file with these arguments, -A, -I. Now, if everything goes successful, then all we would have to do is restart the target device and verify that the Apache web server is running, and the remote agent services start automatically. Now, on Linux-based systems, they're not called services, they're called daemons. And just like Windows services, they are running in the background. And so what we have to do is verify and make sure that the remote agent starts up automatically, and also the Apache web server was installed successfully, and we're able to see a default web page. Now let's go back and let's take a look at what's going on here. Okay, now even though we're copying to a Raspberry Pi and it doesn't really have a huge amount of resources, it's actually going pretty smoothly. I'll go back to the my IoTView node, my virtual machine on my Raspberry Pi, and I'm going to take a look and see. And I see here in the log window that it's successful. Everything's pretty much successful. There are no errors. And so all of these are these critical installation files that will allow me to run my project, to run my project within my HTML5 based browser. And the key is to make sure there are no errors in this process. We'll head back to the development node, and patiently we'll wait until it's done. Now, once it's done, as you can see, we're still connected. All right, and then now we can go back to our IoTView node. And just like as the instructions say, let's go ahead and let's say Control C. We can kill the process. Now, once we did Control C, we're back in that directory. Let's do a list contents, and let's verify that this installation file is here. So, following the directions inside of the guide or the example, I'm going to say sudo or superuser do, and then I'm going to / meaning look in this directory for this particular installation file or this utility -a -I, and hit enter, and that'll begin the installation process. What it's doing, and I'll just say yes to this, what it's doing at this point, it's going to install all of the necessary components, like the Linux-based components, like the Apache web server. In Windows, you have Microsoft Internet Information Server, or IIS. On the Linux side of things, we generally use Apache. So once it completes the installation, then we will reboot the computer, and then once it comes back up, we'll verify that the background services, or in this case daemons, are installed and ready to go. Now, looking at the log here as it's finished, we want to verify that the installation was completed successfully, and there are no errors. Now, once we've done that, we're good to go. Let us reboot the computer, or in this case, the Raspberry Pi. So as it's rebooting, it shouldn't take that long, especially since it's a virtual machine. Once it comes back online, I'm going to do two things. I'll do one thing actually on the Raspberry Pi, which is I'm going to open up this web browser, and I'm just simply going to type in the word localhost. Now, if the web server, the Apache web server, was installed correctly, as soon as I type in localhost, I should get a default web page. And this is saying this is the default web page that says, hey, it works. Now, the second thing that I need to do is I need to go to the development node. And on the development node, I'm going to verify that the service, or the remote agent, is actually started automatically. So I'll verify that the IP address is correct, and I'll just simply connect using the remote management utility. Once it's connected successfully, I should see that indicated in the status window. I don't need to install any more runtime files. And the only other thing that I need to check before I do anything is to go here to Projects and go to Mobile Access and make sure that this, under the web category here, make sure that the Enable CGI is enabled. This checkbox is enabled. Once I've made that verification, I head back to the remote management section in the ribbon, click on Connect. I see that I'm still connected, and now let's push down the project. And just like it did before, you'll make sure this folder does not exist. It'll just ask you, do you want to create it? In this case, we'll just say yes. And it should, at this point, it'll push down the project files. And since this is not a large project, it shouldn't take that long. Now, if you got a large project, it may take a few minutes. Now, one thing that I want to emphasize, that if you are utilizing the Raspberry Pi or a Linux-based distribution, just note that typical Windows services, or the things that will run on Windows, will not run on a Linux system. Like, for instance, ActiveX controls, .NET controls, and so forth. There may be ways around it, but there are, just note that there are limitations to utilizing a Linux-based system as opposed to a Windows-based system. And with that in mind, keep your projects very simple to deploy, very simple to develop, and very simple to run. Now, once the files have downloaded successfully, we should see that under the status that it said the files were sent successfully, and now let's run the project. All right, now once I ran the project, let's close it down, and if I wanted to see what, if the project is indeed running, I'll just simply reopen it and it'll say, hey, okay, the project is running. Now, unlike using the secure viewer, the secure viewer will automatically start the console so that you can see what's going on. But with Raspberry Pis, and particularly using mobile access, we have to open up the web browser. So I will go back to my IoTView. And let's go full screen. Now, I've got the web page up, or the web browser up, and what I need to do is, and I just took the liberty of keeping this URL here. This is the type of URL that you have to put in. Now, again, your URL may be different because mine, I have a startup SG, or a startup screen group. This SG is screen group here. So I'm going to copy this URL. Go back to my Chromium browser, and I'm going to paste and go. Now, if everything works, okay, if this is licensed correctly and so forth like that, in this case it's not, but this is what I should see. Okay, this is what I should see here. So as soon as you type it in, depending on how you develop your application, this is what you should see, and this indicates that the project was pushed down successfully. Now, in my system here, I don't have the license to actually run it here, so that may be one of the reasons why I'm not getting the I/O that I expect. But in any case, that is how it's done. Now let's head back to the development node, just to kind of give you an idea of why my screen came up like, with the startup SG, and why your URL has to be accurate. Now, if I go to graphics here and I come down to screen group here, you'll see this is the screens. These are the screens that my system it's supposed to, or my application is supposed to start up with. So I just simply say, hey, point to this particular screen group, and one of the key things is it was saved as an HTML file or a window. So that's why I can see it inside of a web browser. Okay, now that concludes this segment on how to utilize the remote management utility to view to push down a project and view a project in Secure Viewer and IoTView. Now, there's a couple of questions that most people may have, and one of the questions is, well, when would I use this capability as opposed to using the Secure Viewer thin client capability? Now, suppose you are a water system, you work for a water utility and so forth, and your network is not stable enough to where you can have a remote node in the field and connecting back to, let's say, a data center at the main community municipal building or something like that, or the main water building. You have let's say a lift station or a pump station, and the connection is just not kosher. And you want to run a project out there in the field without having this system out there to connect back. This is what you would utilize. You would utilize this capability. You would simply develop your application in your office, and then you would push the application or push the project down to that remote node. And that remote node will operate in a standalone capacity, and you could just simply develop your application in one location, push the project down, and run your application in another location. This is a traditional model of developing SCADA or HMI applications and pushing down the project to a remote station. In areas where the network is really good and you've got redundant connections and so forth like that, you may want to consider using the Secure Viewer thin client. But in areas where you don't have that capability, then you may want to utilize this remote management capability as well. And also, as it relates to the Raspberry Pi, this is a very good useful tool to also do the same thing. Develop in one location and push it down to a very inexpensive computer called a Raspberry Pi. Now, another question someone may have is, well, what about licensing? Well, in order for me to utilize this capability, I can actually say, well, I can have a license embedded. I can utilize this capability to send the license down or activate the license and push it down to that remote node. Okay, using this embedded license capability, or as a standalone system, just simply have the software installed on the remote node, have it licensed and ready for me to push a project down. So, with this, that concludes this segment of Xperts on Tap. Let's see here. Let me close this down so I can give you at least my parting information. And again, my name was Rufus Hanson. I'm a technology advocate with InSource Solutions, and here's my email information. Feel free to reach out to me at any time if you have any questions. Thank you, and have an awesome day.